It might get a little bit complicated, but we want to make sure that you're part of the whole thing. Last year, 2024, the Daily Maverick broke a story regarding possible irregularities in a contentious 836 million rand oxygen plants project by the Independent Development Trust. That's the IDT. I want you to remember that name. Now, that report by the Daily Maverick then reported to the Department of Public Works. Well, IDT, should I say, actually, reports to the Department of Public Works, which is, of course, headed up by Minister Dean McPherson. Now, the publication then revealed, that's the Daily Maverick, revealed that the 428 million rand of that spend was said to go to the Bulkeng Pty Ltd, which was found to not possess the required accreditation to deal in medical equipment. So money was meant to go to a particular company called Bulkeng Pty Ltd, but it doesn't even have the accreditation to actually deal in medical equipment. The department has then since announced that a forensic investigation has been ordered with regards to the entire ordeal, including IDT itself. But there were contestations then that have been put forward, one by the EFF saying that the minister is actually interfering and needs to stop trying to find out a lot more with regards to some of the details with regards to this. But then there were more allegations then with regards to what actually happened. Was there perhaps an article put forward, that article by the Daily Maverick, was there perhaps a bribe that was put forward in order to implicate one of the officials at IDT and others? Let's unpack this a little bit more. Daily Maverick's own investigative journalist, Pieter-Louis Myburgh, joins me now as well. Peter, I don't know if I've put in anything that you perhaps don't agree with. Please just set the record straight for me, Pieter-Louis.
Good afternoon to your viewers. Yeah, no, I think that's a good summary of the events. So last year in October, Daily Maverick did reveal some concerns over a 800 million rand contract from the Independent Development Trust to install these oxygen plants across South Africa. The report was followed up by 2 subsequent reports. It's a series of reports now, just detailing several red flags in the handling of this contract that also kind of implicates the IDT CEO, Tebogo Malaka, and then also the Director General at the Department of Health. And, you know, subsequently, we started hearing indications that there's a counter-narrative building in terms of why we're reporting on this issue and what the motivation might be. And this then now culminated in an article that was published by Mr. JJ Tabane on the Times Live news platform, in which he alleged or claimed, made very serious allegation that the Public Works Minister, Mr. Dean McPherson, had paid a bribe to the journalist who'd been working on the IDT issue, i.e. myself, in order to tarnish the name and reputation of the IDT and its CEO, Tebogo Malaka. The article itself, it's available for anybody to peruse and scrutinize.
Yep.
Very clearly, it does not rely on any evidence whatsoever. It's allegedly here and allegedly this, allegedly that, but still kicked off this very serious allegation against the minister, and then also implicitly against myself. You know, I subsequently, I got hold of the source documentation on which this initial claim was made.
Okay, Peter,
and it really amounts to nothing, but it's a couple of pages of typed up allegations in which supposedly contain these telephonic transcripts between myself and the minister.
Pieter-Louis,
discussing the payment.
Sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm going to interrupt because I just don't want us to, of course, just run ahead with the story when we perhaps have segments with which we could deal with intermittently.
Sure.
Just the primary question then that people ask is, were you then paid a bribe by Minister Dean McPherson in order to write that article?
Yeah, like, so it's unfortunate that one has to provide an answer to such ludicrous questions, but the answer is an emphatic no. We do not receive payments for furthering any cause in anybody's favor. And, you know, in this instance, I think the discussion shouldn't really be about did I get a payment or not. I absolutely did not. This is a journalistic issue in which it has become incredibly easy in South Africa. The bar is very low, seemingly, to publish articles on very flimsy, if any, evidence. There is no evidence provided by Mr. Dabane. Compare that to the types of work we produce, and Amabungani and News24, etc., credible news organizations. When we make these sorts of allegations or put these reports forward, they contain very detailed forensic documents, evidence, spreadsheets, etc., to show the reader why we make certain conclusions or why we allege that certain people received payments or were the beneficiaries of money laundering, corruption, etc., etc.
Why do you think
this article really contains no evidence whatsoever? And then, of course, it comes at the time that there are these probes into the IDT and the 800 million oxygen plants tender, which really is still at the core of the whole matter.
Okay, Pieter-Louis, then why you? Why they? I mean, I know you wrote the article ultimately, but why then is there the supposition that you would have actually received this bribe? Why do you think that has then come to the fore as this massive allegation?
Yeah, look, I think I'm in this instance more of a bit player in this saga. We caught a bit of shrapnel merely because I wrote the story. I think the intended target really here in this instance is the Public Works Minister, Minister Dean McPherson. And I must just emphasize and very strongly just name here that I don't hold a brief for any minister, whether they be in the DA or the ANC, but we, nevertheless report factually on whatever we always report on. And in this instance, clearly, because I was the journalist who'd been writing on the IDT issue, it was very easy then to come up with this fabricated hogwash assertion that he'd been bribing me to drive a narrative against the Bochum Malak at the IDT. So I think really the reasonable viewer would very easily link two issues. There's a corrupt contract that was revealed by us, the Daily Maverick. Then the Minister, Dean McPherson, launches a forensic investigations into them. They start panicking, and then very clearly whoever is involved in this, one of their solutions would be to kick up a lot of dust, throw mud in the air, and make these kinds of assertions to distract the public's attention possibly from the real issue at hand, which is this 800 million rand contract. And really, once again, I just want to, this is a teachable moment, I always say. It's a bit of a lesson in deconstructing investigative pieces or any news article. The original story that started all this nonsense does not contain any of that evidence. And then very worryingly, of course, a political party like Action SA really then goes and stokes the fire by releasing these statements saying that the minister should be suspended immediately. And they note with concern that these allegations that a journalist was bribed without making any effort to ascertain who the journalist is or whether he did actually possibly receive a bribe.
Pieter-Louis,
any plausible evidence as far as that's concerned.
Pieter-Louis, will you be instituting any kind of proceedings then on the back of this? Because, of course, this is disparaging. It puts your name in disrepute to some extent as well, then, claiming that you've received this bribe. Does that mean then you'd be considering putting in an indictment of sorts or instituting legal proceedings, whether you're in your own personal capacity or as the Daily Maverick?
Yeah, look, so firstly, I've invited JJ Dabane to come on air on different platforms so we can talk this out. He's refusing, he's gone to ground, he's too scared to discuss this issue because he knows it's factually incorrect. Then in communication with Action SA, which is one of the lead kind of spreaders or disseminators now of this fabricated lie, I've also indicated to them that I will also consider my legal options just to see what we can do to address this matter. But ultimately, it's something that I'm very open to discuss, frankly, with anybody. I'm more than happy to discuss this issue going forward, and I'll definitely consider my legal options if it becomes necessary.
All right. Talk to me about what you said a little bit earlier, which was the source documentation as to where, this article that was written about you having been bribed in this regard then would have ultimately come from. What exactly does that source documentation say?
Yeah, so why I say that the JJ Dabane piece very clearly infers that it's me. I knew that there's documentation being circulated a publication, the Star newspaper, and its editor, I think it's Mr. Sifiso Mshlangu, they seem to have been in possession of 3 or 4 typed up pages. So it's not transcripts or even anything that looks like a WhatsApp interface or anything of that sort. It's this kind of typed up pages that now claims they are transcripts of these conversations that I had with the minister, etc., claiming that, I'm saying in one discussion, supposedly, I've received the payment and now I'll go ahead and publish the story earlier this year, which is not very well fabricated because it doesn't add up. The date of that discussion was in January this year, and I was still on leave then. We didn't publish any stories, and the message said I would publish a story slandering Tebogo Malaka from the RT the next day, whereas these articles were all published between October 2024 and December 2024. So even the fabricators did not even do a very good job of producing a convincing piece of fabricated evidence, unfortunately for them. And there's a couple of other shortcomings. But, so that's basically how I became aware of what the material is that JJ Tabani was working with. And I don't know if the Star newspaper or IOL, they've been, since we started publishing these RDT pieces, they've been producing kind of counter stories, saying how wonderful this oxygen plants project was and how we'd been getting it wrong, etc., where the contrary really seems to be true, which is why a PwC investigation has been ordered so that they can get to the bottom of the alleged irregularities.
And I'm going to touch on that investigation in just a moment as well. But ultimately, this is journalist versus journalist. This is media house versus media house. But the key question mark will still remain, and maybe I should have asked this a little bit earlier, and you alluded to it. You've had absolutely no relations then, ultimately, other than in writing the story to the Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure. Is that correct?
No, absolutely. And I think we should just be careful to say it's kind of media house versus media house and have this kind of false equivalence kind of thing. Once again, viewers, the public has to look at the quality of the reporting. So our reporting, Amabangani, News 24's investigations team, we all work with forensic or produce forensically based investigative material, very meticulously sourced, very closely researched pieces that really has to clear a very high hurdle in terms of a burden of evidence before we say the IDT's contract was dodgy or PRASA did this or Ace Mahshide did that, etc. I'm just referring to some of my other work. Something that would stand up in a court of law and also be cleared by the press ombudsman. This story now does not come near to carrying the same, not even remotely, the same kind of evidence weight to show that there's been a payment between the minister and myself, because the payment does not exist. And the
Pieter-Louis, I may understand.
The transcripts don't exist either; they're fabricated.
And
that's why Mr. Barney couldn't go and show them to his readers like we do. We show the documents to the public, like this is what the IDT document says about the contract, etc. On the other hand, these guys just don't produce this material. And then a party like Action SA, of course, then goes and writes these statements saying this should be investigated, etc.
Pieter-Louis, I might fully understand exactly where you're coming from with regards to the amount of detail that you certainly put into these articles and the hard work that certainly goes into it. Let's just also understand that it is because of the latter article that we've gotten to this stage, and that's why I fully understand where you're coming from in that regard. It must also be noted then as well that, of course, the primary issue at hand is, of course, these oxygen plants project by the Independent Development Trust. Now, with this forensic investigation at play, please do tell us more exactly. Is this set to uncover that 800 million with regards to expenditure that is possibly irregular? Or is this really just looking at that 428 million rand spend, which was set, but obviously given to people without the correct accreditation?
Yeah, no, it's very good that you break it down like that. So the 800 billion rand, that is the kind of the global total figure for these intended rollouts, and then Bulkeng got the largest slice of the contract. But it certainly is my understanding that the PwC will now go and probe the entire kind of contract as a whole. Seeing as it's not just the portion of the contract awarded to Bulkeng that is in doubt or appears dubious, but also the other sections of the contract. So some of your viewers who would have seen our reporting would have seen that there are certain shortcomings in the tender process itself. The prices were insanely inflated. In some instances, the IDT would have, if they had gone ahead, would have paid up to 700% more than market value would have been to actually procure these kind of oxygen plants for hospitals, etc., etc. There's just a whole slew of issues that really need to be unpacked and looked further. And I certainly have the understanding that PwC's mandate would be to look at the awarding in its entirety, the bid adjudication committees, BAC, etc., the involvement of the Bogomalaka, and then also the health DG, Dr. Sandile Buthelezi, who coincidentally is also already the subject of a Hawks investigation for receiving an alleged 500,000 payment in relation to another IDT project. So this nexus between the IDT and the Department of Health, etc., certainly looks very troubling, and there really is a lot, I believe, over the years that went wrong at the IDT. It certainly looks like it, and I think there's a couple of very nervous people now, now that there's actually somebody who wants to go in and launch these forensic investigations.
Yeah, and it's those irregularities as well that we certainly would want to uncover. Look, Pieter-Louis, there's a lot at play in all of this, and we certainly hope to get to the bottom of both situations at their very least as well. But thank you so much for the time. That's what we call, of course, the right of reply in journalism, to give you your side of the story and to hear your side of the story. Pieter-Louis Myburgh, who is Daily Maverick investigative journalist.